a lot of high performing leaders, a lot of high performing uh, just people in general, even if they're individual contributors, they usually had someone that they were talking to, right, in a strategic way. It's all around kind of how we're thinking, right? And we have what's called A game and B game thinking. We're emotional beings. So getting to understand and embrace that, I feel like is an important first step too of making more sense of what emotions you are feeling and what you're experiencing.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again at We Are Mentally United podcast. We talk to different people from different walks of life at this podcast and ask them questions around their mental wellness journey, things that they have been through in their life, and obstacles that they have overcome in their journey as well. Today, we have a very, very, very inspiring guest with us today, Jordan White. Hi, Jordan. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey Z, it's good to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, Jordan, to get things started, for folks who might not know of you, can you share a little bit about yourself, your journey, what do you do, and the journey that brought you here?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Well, it's like I said, it's just an honor to be here with you, and I appreciate the work that your organization stands for. And I think mental health is just such a critical thing to be paying attention to. So I'm just so happy to be here having this conversation. But yeah, I'm actually born and raised here in Denver. I went to George Washington High School, so the biggest high school in Denver, and played played basketball. So I've got an athletic background, and that actually got me through college. And once I got into my career, I worked for a credit union for almost 10 years, and I noticed that my leadership journey there at the credit union, a lot of that was shaped by my athletic background. So. Someone who really inspired me as I got into leadership was Phil Jackson, and he talks about this idea of oneness, right? And like a team, when they act as oneness, that's when they can maximize. And I think for any basketball fans out there, when Phil Jackson did some pretty incredible things and cultivated some pretty incredible players. So, um, during my journey at the Credit Union of Colorado, I'm so grateful for the opportunity that they provided. One of the um, employee benefits was actually tuition reimbursement. So I went back to school and got my master's in communication and leadership. And that's where I learned about professional coaching. And I learned that a lot of high performing leaders, a lot of high performing uh, just people in general, even if they're individual contributors, they usually had someone that they were talking to, right, in a strategic way and could process out loud and just get their thoughts out and again just be really clear in what they want to accomplish and how they want to go about it. So I was very intrigued by that, and that actually led me to seeking out a coach. And I worked with a coach for a couple of years before I actually started my own practice. So I think that brings me more into modern times where I'm actually a practitioner of a self-leadership program. So I guide people through their unique journey of self-leadership. And the idea there is that it's all around kind of how we're thinking, right? And we have what's called A game and B game thinking. A game is more conscious and it's more value driven, and B game is more pattern based and habitual. And yeah, it's kind of narrow as well. It can be at least. So that can restrict us. And that journey is very unique for every single person, which I think is a huge part of my philosophy as a coach. Just seeing everyone as one of one and the intrinsically valuable person that they are, and helping them along their journey and getting from A to B, whatever that is for them. That could be in leadership, that could be life, love, or leadership. So I'll pause there and see, yeah, what other questions I can clarify.
Thank you. No, thank that was very much in detail, and like you've had quite an interesting journey in terms of credit union, making up the switch towards leadership, coaching. I would really like to hear more about the A game and B game, but before we talk about that, can you take us back to your childhood, growing up in Colorado? How was family life like? Were you always into coaching, leadership, or was there something that guided you towards that path?
Yeah, that's a cool question. Yeah, so um, my mom likes to remind me that I've always been a listener and a nurturer. There's I come from, a divorced home, and I'm actually so I'm biracial as well. So that was kind of interesting growing up, just seeing uh, two different dynamics come together, culturally. And so I grew up not, it may sound cliche, but it's not really seeing color, just because my, my family is just so diverse. And, my mom's side, my white side, some of my aunts even married into people of color. And, it's just very blended. So that's something I have a lot of gratitude for. But yeah, it also caused some, I think, identity, challenges. I grew up in Littleton for a good portion of my life as well, and it's predominantly kind of like a white area. So being one of the few people of color, that was kind of interesting, right? And just navigating that. Um, but yeah, I've learned to really embrace that, um, and really appreciate, the value that kind of having that wider lens brought me, So, but yeah,
How different was it from back then and now in terms of the biracial upbringing? How different? What has changed? How different was it back then?
I think back then it was just a little more, uh, yeah, I think just identity wise, right? Like kind of where do I fit in? Who Uh, yeah, like who's my group of, friends and who's my group of people that I can more connect with and see myself in. And, that, not to be a martyr or anything like that, but yeah, that was challenging for me to really feel connected with, a certain group of people, just again, like being biracial. And I think that's the biggest change is that I've really embraced that now. And that actually allows me to connect with all types of people and something I'm really proud of. Back then it was, I wasn't black enough for when I transferred over to George Washington High School, I wasn't black enough. And when, I was at Chatfield, for example, there was that's the mixed kid or that's the black kid, you know what I mean? So it was just kind of, um, yeah, it created a lot of different experiences that were challenging that I definitely needed, to process and get, go on my own mental health journey about like identity and who am I and leaning into that. And that's again something I've really developed, just a admiration for, having that biracial background.
That's something that I can very much relate to. Like I was born in a South Asian family, but I moved to the States around 9 to 10 years ago. And currently, not currently, in fact, I would say in the last 4 or 5 years, whenever I've gone back, I've felt that challenge where when I talk to people, when I communicate with people back home, it's like, you're not South Asian enough. And then when I come up over here back to the US where I live, it's more like, you're not US enough. So that's something that I feel like a lot of folks go through, not just within biracial communities, but also when people travel and they try and adjust into the community, or they try and fit into the community. I think that's something that a lot of us go through.
Yeah. No, I appreciate hearing that. And it's again like kind of going back to we're all one of one and we all have our unique experiences and with culture and just upbringing and that shapes a lot of how we see ourselves and how we, see the
100%.
world. So
Yeah. And I also feel like that young age, that 3 to 15, 3 to 18, is an age where people or kids are trying to figure out what communities that they can be part of, what friend circles do they belong to. And a lot of it causes huge stresses for them too, because I work with a lot of kids in my therapy practice, and a lot of them are dealing up with self-doubts, self-esteem, identity crisis in terms of where do we fit in. We like to do this, but this does not seem popular enough. We want to be popular, but we are also introvert. So it's a lot of it's a very complicated age at that time, and in those moments, having a support system, I feel like is super important. Or uh, in hindsight, when we grow up and we reflect back on our younger days, it makes sense why we dealt with situations in a particular way. But in those moments of younger age, it gets really challenging.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to just commend you for the work you do. It's important, and helping kids process that, and so with the work that I do, working with most people are kind of in that upper millennial age group, mid 30s to upper 30s, and um, a lot of who we are is shaped, kind of like you were saying, in those young ages, and it's actually I know you know this, but just to say it, right? Like it's kind of pushed on us. It's pushed on us by our caregivers or whoever raised us. It's pushed on us by society, and it creates, so to reference the A game and B game again, it can create these thinking biases, right? Where we're maybe not seeing things as clearly as we can. It's potentially distorted. So B game, meaning it's a bias, right? And
Hmm.
it can really um, feel true to us because of right our experiences and how we were raised and the idea of right and wrong and all of that. So a lot of us in our 30s are kind of undoing, right, and untangling that web and and stepping into becoming, right? Like actually actively choosing who we want to be, right? And getting more connected with that. And it's inspiring to be around. And again, just to commend you on some of that work you're doing with the younger people, helping them, probably starting off on a stronger foot.
No, I really appreciate that, and kudos to you as well, because I feel like the audience and population that you are working with, that can also be a very crisis situation or a crisis position for people to be in, because as we grow up, a lot of times we are doing things because the society has pushed us to do that, or that sounded like a safe thing to do. But eventually, when I feel like when a prefrontal develops well, and we start recognizing what we actually want to do, that's where a lot of times for a lot of people crisis comes through. Um, and you've been working with those folks. So how did growing up from Colorado, how did the journey end up being in union?
Mhm. Yeah, so kind of like I mentioned, I played college basketball, so I went to a junior college here in Colorado, and then eventually transferred to a school out in Kansas City. So I finished up my undergrad there, and then made my way back. I was ready for some sunshine and 4 clear seasons, and of course home. There's no place like home. Um, and I was kind of bouncing around for a little bit there. I wasn't sure, if I'm being honest with you, like I went to school to play basketball. I wasn't sure in what I wanted to do with my career. It wasn't, very clear in that when I first went to school. So yeah, I came back and I was serving and, you know, doing the yeah, like service thing. And then I actually ended up working at Nordstrom for a little bit, where maybe a story for another time where I actually met my wife. Um, but I I got to a point where I was just feeling like there was more for me to do, and I wanted to get into more of a stable role, and I wanted to be a part of something that was actually giving back to the community or connecting with the community in some way, shape, or form. So there was actually a friend of mine who was working at the Credit Union of Colorado, and she um, gladly, was willing to put her name in the hat as far as referral goes, and ended up, that I started off in the contact center there, and I worked while I was there. That's the area of the organization that I stayed in, and just kind of made my way up into leadership roles. So that's kind of how that all came to be. I was serving and kind of just getting by, making sure bills are paid. But I was ready to, yeah, step into something a little more stable and career focused.
Was there some aspect of your mind that always knew that you're going to be an entrepreneur or you would want to do something for your as your business or as for yourself?
Yeah, I like to say yes. I, I just really strongly believe in, um, every single one of us has a purpose here.
True.
And when you find something that really lights you up and uh, where you start actually flowing from this thing, I'm pointing at my heart instead of right, like trying to just overthink and kind of process everything through in a just a really logical way or try and make something work for someone else. That that can create some challenges in my opinion. However, right, like a lot of my value system was very aligned with the Credit Union of Colorado, and I still support and still bank there. Right, like I still support what they're about because they are all about doing what's right for the member, right, and uh, seeing everyone as unique, and so that really resonated with me, and I think that actually if it weren't for the credit union that I worked for and their support of uh, my personal development, I'm not even sure if I would have discovered coaching. So it's a long way to answer your question, but yeah, I think there was always, kind of this idea that I'd be doing something on my own. Even as a kid, I was mowing lawns and like kind of removing snow in the winter. And I always had, that idea of how can I go out and help someone? And of course, right, like make a little money while doing it. So yeah, I'd say that was always something that was on my mind.
I love the mindset about it in terms of always trying to be there for the community because I think that kind of a mindset is something that's needed more of in today's time and world. And also like for organizations to be so supportive of their employees is really crucial. I don't think we see a lot of that in today's time and age, but with your own experience at credit union and how supportful they were, aside from developing you in as a coach or inspiring you to become a coach, also the tuition reimbursements program that these organizations have, those are also really powerful because then again they inspire us to take the next step in our career or in our profession.
Yeah, yeah, well said. I do some actually on a coaching platform, and it's more so focused towards career development. And I'm hearing a lot of the opposite, right? Like a lot of organizations these days are, kind of seeing eh, they've got some things turned around, right? Like it's people or it's profit over people, right? And it seems like that it would be better if that was switched around. And if you take care of your people, turns out, right? Like the profit kind of takes care of itself. So, but yeah, a lot of folks that I'm talking to these days are kind of at a crossroads with their career and questioning, if they should just suck it up, right? Or if they should just kind of keep pushing through. It's like, well, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but if you're asking that question, then, let's explore what that actually means for you.
100%. And again, like as you said, like before also, finding that passion or doing something that your heart tells you to do, that goes a long way, especially when it comes to career, because you don't want to feel like a robot or you don't want to hating your job will always lead into mental health struggles or any kinds of mental struggles. And a lot of times I feel like it people really want to take that step, but the whole thing is the monetary value of it. Are they going to lose too much? Is this going to be something that they would not like 6 months down the line? Is this something that they're going to regret few months down the line? So I feel like a lot of those things play a role when people are thinking about it, but at the end of the day, I feel like the best thing that one can do for themselves is work in a profession or study or get an education in something that their heart connects with. Um, this is also coming from a personal space for me too, because when I was in my undergrad, I started my undergrad journey as a software engineer because that's something that my family wanted me to do. My mom was very big on me becoming a software engineer, and I was like, okay, I like playing video games. I can become a software engineer and maybe do something in the gaming industry. And I went into that field. And I stayed in that field for like 3 semesters. I was studying in Malaysia at that time. And after 3 semesters, my CGPA, Jordan, was 1.7. And I was literally 1 semester away from being sent back home to Pakistan because we had to, you cannot stay in Malaysia and continue getting education if your GPA is below 2.0. So the whole thing was that I take a risk, I do another semester in software engineering, I take that coding class, I think it was C++ plus plus or something, and Java class, which I had failed for 3 semesters straight. Uh, and I somehow turn it around. And my mom was like, you'll be able to do it, just put your mind to it. And I'm a very goal-oriented person, so I was trying to put my mind to it, but the connection was just not happening. It was just not making sense up over here for some odd reason. Um, and I remember it was a very, 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 very challenging time, very difficult time. At that time, I didn't even know what mental health was. So I was just beating up myself to it in terms of like, I cannot do it, and there is something wrong with me that because of which I cannot do it, or why the hell can I not focus on this thing? And then I had some folks in my support system who really pushed me to be daring in that situation and take the risk and make the switch to another profession. And at that time, I was also very much into media because, like, again, gaming, media, that was the aspect that attracted me towards software engineering. So I was like, maybe I can go in this in that area. But then I was hearing all these stories about like, how a bachelor's in media is not going to be really good enough because it's more technical. So I won't be able to make as much money as in software engineering. So there was a lot of dilemma that was going on. But I'm glad for the support system and for the folks who I had around at that time in my life, who pushed me to do it. And I did that. I did 1 semester in Malaysia and then I transferred to US and I finished my education, my undergrad education up in upstate New York. And I graduated with 3.93 because I was doing something I was passionate about. I was doing filmmaking. I was managing folks. I was in leadership positions, creating TV shows and stuff. So it was like I can't even imagine being stuck still in that bubble where for 3 semesters I was so miserable and all I thought was there was some problem in me and I cannot do it. Um, but yeah, no, I just wanted to share that story with you because it really hit me when you mentioned that. And I was like, ah, I was there. I lived that. And there were so many different things that were pushing me in one direction, but then there were so many other fears that were holding me back.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing the stories. I'm guessing that a lot of people listening can really relate to that, right? And something, to, I guess, keep hyping up this credit union I worked for. Another thing that um, they had as a practice was doing your Myers-Briggs at your MBTI, and then also doing, it was at the time called Strengths Finder. It's called Clifton Strengths now. Um, and that was something I also learned, to kind of connect to what you were saying there. When I did my Clifton Strengths, actually both in combination, like as a INFP, like that I discovered from my Myers-Briggs, that actually shows kind of how you give and receive energy and how you process information, right? And, we don't all do that the same way. And I think, we generally uh, assume that people process information the same way or learn the same way that we do, and it's just not the truth, right? And I think
Hmm.
that paired with Clifton strengths, um, a lot of folks, me included, right? When we get into our professional careers, we focus on what's not working well, right? Or what we want to like kind of what we see as a gap or something that we don't do well. We want to develop it. And I'm
Hmm.
not saying there's anything wrong with that. However, kind of the theory behind Clifton strengths is that we're naturally wired in certain ways as well. So the idea is to actually be using your strengths to you know, to more so guide you in how you're going about your work and even how you're developing yourself, like making sure that your strengths are leading you in a certain way. So, but it's so profound when you actually shift, kind of like you did, into something to where it does feel a little more natural and like your natural way of processing information, or you're feeling more connected, more than just up in your mind, but actually something else is, guiding you. So I'm glad
Mm-hmm.
that you had that experience, and that's my hope for everyone out there.
No, I'm like in hindsight, I'm really glad I had that experience, but in the moment it was miserable. Like I still remember that January to March period when I was so low. And again, at that time, did not know what mental health was. Um, do you see a lot of that in your coaching experience as well with people struggling with transitions or double questioning if they should be taking up a certain step or not?
Yeah, constantly. Yeah, and my ears every time perk up when I hear should, right? Because should kind of that indicates that there's again like there's some type of thinking bias that's activated. It's like that there's one perfect answer here, or that there's one certain way I should be, or that this thing should work out in front of me. But yeah, just about everyone I work with is in some type of transition, whether it be going from one role to the next within an organization, or becoming a parent for the first time, right? Like that's a whole new version of yourself that this little precious thing is asking of you. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's on a spectrum for sure, or like a range, but yeah, working through some type of transition period in their life.
What's the one or couple of most crucial things that people should be mindful of in those transitional moments?
Mhm. Yeah, well, I'd echo the should thing, right? Like, how often are you asking, or how often are you guided by should? I'm sure people have heard about it. Like, how often are you shitting on yourself, or are you being shitted on, by society, or a spouse, or um, a boss who feels like they know what's best for you? Then this is where the work of self-leadership comes back into play. It's like you're the captain of your ship, and you actually get to choose. And when you step into that, that's a very empowering, place to operate from. Even if you do want to commit yourself to an organization, that's great. I love that. If you found something that where you can thrive, and your best self can, contribute. But that those rigid ideas of how things should be, I'd encourage people to really be aware of that and start shifting into, well, what do you want it to be, and what would you like for it to be, right? And you start connecting with a different part of, your mental makeup, and then of course, right, like the soul starts coming into that conversation as well, where you're talking about want and desire, and being connected to something. So those are a couple, things I'd offer, and there's one definition that I use in the self-leadership program that's pretty foundational to all of it. And it's actually an objective or a scientific definition of good, which most people, um, think we hear good, we think kind of moral goodness, or, that was a good meal, right? It was delicious, or whatever it may be. But this objective definition is something is good to the degree that it has all the attributes required to fulfill its purpose,
Hmm.
right? So if we think about that, most people, have some type of aspiration, right? But they're not always clear in the reason behind it, right? Like, so the purpose. And so that's what I'd really encourage people to do. This definition could be useful in a meeting room, or, as you're approaching, if you're thinking about like a career switch, for example, or something like that, um, what's the purpose, right? Like, what's the purpose of this meeting? And then you kind of work backwards. All right, what are the attributes required for that meeting to be fulfilled in a purposeful way? So that would be another um, tool I would offer is something is good to the degree that it has all the attributes required to fulfill its purpose. And when we start thinking that way, it's a new level of, I think, critical thinking. It's a new level of inquiry. and your mind starts to orient to, kind of filling in the gaps of what's between you and the purpose being fulfilled, as opposed to uh, pointing out outward or pointing fingers or blaming external forces, which I don't know, those are going to exist regardless. So I don't know. I'm just all about how can you control or influence what happens around you.
I'm hearing a lot of common themes about empowering ourselves, about being confident in our skin, in our abilities, in the strengths that we have, and also at the same time having a lot of curiosity. And that's something that I also read on your website, where you mentioned that your coaching is rooted in curiosity, compassion, and consciousness. Can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Yeah, would love to. I often say uh, certainty extinguishes curiosity. So, when we become so certain of something, right, our ability to keep learning or for our view to continue to expand really gets restricted. So being curious is it's part of our nature. You likely see this with even little people, right? Like younger people are just so curious about how things work, and
Mm-hmm.
you can tell they're generally and they're asking why because they want to understand, not why because they're judging something. Right.
Exactly.
So, being curious with the person on the other side of a coaching engagement, that really helps guide, uh, I think, clarity, right? Like, or it helps unroot clarity, and it helps people discover and self-examine. And by having compassion, doing that in a gentle and loving way, it's my intention to create a safe space for people to go to that level of exploration. And again, that consciousness meaning presence, really. And there could be like a little, I don't know, shift in someone's uh, inflection in their voice, or just even like a face that they make, or their body language shifts when they talk about
Mm-hmm.
something, and it may not be quite aligned with what they're saying. You know what I mean? So just being conscious enough to be in this space where it is all about them, and to be paying attention for those little micro moments that actually might be impacting the macro of their life. So curiosity, staying open to what might happen, and relieving myself of needing to be sure about something. Um, Consciousness, just being present with people, and compassion, doing it with love.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, that's so interesting that you say that, because I notice that a lot in kids as well, the kids that I work with, in terms of their curiosity, in terms of trying to figure out why a certain thing is happening in a certain way or in a certain direction. And a lot of times that I feel like bothers the parents a bit, because kids are asking too many questions. But when I'm working with families, that's what I try and encourage them. Like, let them be curious. It might be irritating right now, but this is something that's going to benefit them when they're in their teens, when they're in their 20s, when they're in their 30s. So let's not suppress this at this age. Um, Also, another thing that you touched upon was finding that fire within yourselves, or finding that strength within yourselves that lightens up your mood, or that adds up that spark in your eye. Because when I work with a lot of kids who are struggling with anger, who are struggling with body dysregulation issues. Um, and in my intake, one thing that I always tell parents, that my way of working with with the kid is going to be identifying what lights the fire within them, what they get excited about, and then using that as an anchor to help them overcome with the struggles that they're going through. And it works, because a lot of times, as you said, the body language changes when I'm talking about trauma, when I'm talking about not even trauma, like even just the basic how the week was, or what were some low points from the week. Their body becomes a little bit low, a little bit stiff. But the second I talk to them about soccer or any sports or any video games, it all just lightens up, and you can see the spark in their eye. Or if someone's passionate about painting, it just, you can see that spark in their eye and in their voice. And I always encourage family members, or I always highlight it for the family members that this is something that you should encourage more at home so that it gives them that comforting ground to overcome with the struggles that they're going through. So it was very interesting to hear from you that you see that in in your field as well, working with adults, and I notice very much a similar thing even at a very young age.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. You love the description there, and it's I don't want to say it's sad. It's just it's something I'm remaining curious about and compassionate about like how often that potentially gets suppressed. You know what I mean? Like especially as we move into adulthood and we have responsibilities and we need to, align with society's idea of what an adult is, right? We stop playing. We
Mm-hmm.
we start just taking ourselves so seriously and curiosity really starts to go out the window. And again, like that's information. Like when you are lighting up, when you are feeling connected at the way that you just described it, that's information, right? Like that's your inner signal. That's your guidance system telling you like this is for you. Like this is for your soul. And lean
That's your
into that.
energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the
Exactly.
energy I feel like that we put out. That's the energy that keeps us alive, that makes us uh, be happy in moments.
Hmm.
And again, like I feel like energy for everyone is different, but anything in an excessive way could be unhealthy. Like, for example, kids being stubborn at a young age, if that's channeled in a healthy way, if you teach them healthy coping strategies on how to channel that stubbornness, that stubbornness might help them in the future when they go in professional careers and stuff, rather than completely suppressing them or making or teaching them that, hey, you're not supposed to feel this way. Because if that message gets delivered to the brain and then they grow up, then they're just going to do what everyone else is doing. Or they're always going to double question themselves that, oh, should I take a stand on this or should I just like, let the other person be happy in this situation? Um, and a lot of it, like, I feel like is rooted in the childhood messages that we get.
Hmm. Yeah, this is kind of your world of expertise. But what I do know, from going through my own therapy, journey and yeah, just exploring that even in some of my coaching, right? Like a lot of our B game, our biases that I refer to is rooted in some type of stronger emotional experience. We may even call it traumas and like, ooh, I better not ever do that again because, my parent told me no, or I got in trouble, right? And that starts to shape again, like our worldview and our self-view. And that doesn't always get approached with curiosity even, right? But yeah, I think to your point, as my wife and I plan to have kids, I've got two little nieces out in Florida who we love to go visit. And, it's my sole intention to just even stay curious with them. Like one of them is very stubborn. She's a little toddler, right? And she wants something. She's gonna go get it. It's like okay. And even then, you can start. And this is where I think coaching, really the foundation of it is, and especially in the self-leadership program I guide people through, is that questions move minds, right? So if we're asking more questions, we can actually help others, self-generate or maybe kind of expand their awareness. It's like, all right, little one, like, how do you think that makes your sister feel, when you're being that way, right? And you can tell,
Hmm.
like, they're just pausing and like kind of thinking about it. And of course, their little brains are still developing, but even as adults, right, telling someone they're doing something wrong is much less effective than asking them how do you think that went for you and for others,
Hmm.
right? Questions disrupt thought patterns. Questions help people, see what their pattern-based thinking doesn't see.
Questions lead also, and curiosity leads into us evolving as a human species. Uh, I feel like that has been the main element why the whole human civilization is up until here. is
Yeah.
still surviving. Because again, like we are resilient, we are very, very powerful, but at the end of the day, we are also very curious. That's what leads into all these inventions. And a lot of times I feel like in today's time and age especially, it is getting a little suppressed. It is getting a little pushed down that, hey, like, let's not question things. Let's not question this. Let's not question that. And it it's scary because like you need to have a curious mind so that you can keep evolving because life is all about evolving. We are completely different from the people that we were when we were 5, 6 years old or when we were 15 or 20 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing that point up. I mean, and I hear that in so many different uh different aspects. But yeah, like, for work, for example, um so many people want a formula, right? They want to know that this thing plus this thing will equal this result and just keep doing it the same way every time so everything can be predictable and stable. Like, to your point, I mean, then we stop asking questions, then we stop growing, right? We stop innovating, we stop seeing what else might be possible. And uh, that ends up leading back into ourselves as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like we're wired to keep growing. Like that's our human, it's our natural human process is to keep growing and developing and learning. And by wanting everything in our life to just be kind of stable and predictable, I mean, we're kind of missing out on, I don't know, kind of the flavor of life, right? Like our
The beauty of
opportunity.
life.
Yeah, exactly. So of course that's a personal, philosophy or mindset around it, but I welcome change and I invite people to welcome it in their life as well. And once you stop kind of grappling with it and trying to wrestle with every single external factor, wanting to be a certain way, so you can be okay, and so you can go out and accomplish the things you want to do. It's just like I'm not sure how effective of an approach that is versus just becoming friends with change and kind of accepting reality for what it is and partnering with it and starting to again like just be more uh, of a yeah like integrate into the changes that are constantly happening. So I agree with you. I'm concerned about a lot of where our world is going, and people claiming that they know, what's best, or that they know the exact right way to do something. And it's just like, wow, whenever
Or
I
or
hear
they
people
have
say,
all the answers, or their
yeah,
answer is always the right answer.
yeah, I'm just like, whoa, how do you get to a point where you are just believing that with such conviction? And I'm curious about that even, so I digress. But yeah, I think staying open and continuing to just embrace that we're constantly in evolution and that the world also is. I think, yeah, we can start to partner with life and the external forces of it a bit better, more
For,
naturally.
for, for
For
sure, for
sure, for
sure.
sure.
Going back
Going
to
back
the
to
A
the A
game, B
game, B
game,
game,
can
can
you
you
reflect a
reflect
little
a
bit
little
more
bit more
about
about
it?
it?
Talk a
Talk
little
a
bit
little
more
bit more
about it
about it
in
in
detail
detail
around
around
how you
how you
use
use
it,
it,
in
what
what
in what
aspects and
aspects
what
and what
areas
areas
is it
is
being
it
used
being
in
used
your
in your
coaching
coaching
experience?
experience?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, as a thank you to your listeners, they can head over to www.vqprofile.com/JWC. Right. And so there's an assessment that I use. It's called the VQ profile. And this is actually built on around something called the hierarchy of value. So there's an actual scientific codified hierarchy of value in the world, and it starts with systemic value. So if we think about systemic as the head, right, conceptually, what are we thinking about and what do we think is important, or what's the idea that we want to accomplish? So we start there, and it's very dualistic, right? It's either this or that. It's either the idea exists or it doesn't, right? And as we
Mm-hmm.
move up the hierarchy into extrinsic value, that's where the hands come into play. So this is more so doing, this is action, right? And this is more visible, um, uh, like results. So for example, if you're going to buy a car, for example, you're going to likely test drive a few different ones,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to value them in a certain way, right? And then, so we're constantly doing that. Even the laptop I bought, right? Like I compared a few different ones, and all right, that's the one that I value the most. So that's the one I'm going to go with. Um, and then at the top of the hierarchy is intrinsic value. So I usually refer to this stuff as, it's not something you're going to put on an agenda. This is love. This is joy. This is quality of life. This is that spark that you referred to earlier, right? And that's at the top of the hierarchy, and that's infinite. So at the bottom is the head, in the middle is the hands, and at the top is the heart. So A game and B game thinking is measured based on how we're seeing uh, certain things within that hierarchy of value. So we could potentially overvalue something in the systemic realm, meaning uh, you know, everything around me and life needs to be a certain way for it to be correct or for it to be right. And that would be an overvaluation, or we could even undervalue that. It's like, yeah, whatever, people want, I can, adapt to it and, uh, I'll just kind of go with it and, that's fine. Versus right in the middle where the balance is like, yeah, I have an idea of what, you know, being a good person means or being a good leader or being a good parent means. And I also want to work with what's around me, the systems around me to maximize that experience, right? So that would be more of a balanced thinking perspective. So that would be A game thinking is when we're clear. B game is more so when we have distortions, right? It's like me taking my glasses off. It doesn't mean like right or wrong or good or bad. It just means less clear,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this assessment that I use in the self-leadership program identifies people's unique makeup of essentially their mind map, where they're overvaluing or undervaluing certain realms of value in their life, and where they actually have A game clarity, right? It's their highest wisdom. It's where there's actually alignment with the hierarchy of value. And it puts you in a position when you're using those thinking perspectives more consciously and actively for you to create more value in the world, right? And that's really kind of the Cliff Notes version. It can, I mean, there's math involved and all of that, but it's more so what I appreciate most is that I think there's like, I don't know, like 4.6 quadrillion permutations or different results of the assessment. So it's unique to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not me telling you, okay, you need to fix this about your thinking. It's here, let's show you your mind map. And now you get to choose, right? And Carl Jung said something along the lines of, until we bring the unconscious into the conscious, it'll dictate our lives and we'll call it fate. So I believe the same thing about our thinking. Until we bring some of our unconscious, our subconscious, or our pattern-based, our autopilot thinking into the conscious and show it to ourselves, it's gonna run our lives, right? And then we're gonna, yeah, kind of just say that's who I am or that's how it is, as opposed to understanding that we actually have A game thinking perspectives that show us more, and help us understand that there's other opportunities, to address ourselves and see ourselves and also interact with the world. So it's powerful when people get exposed to that and consciously, again, choose to remodel their thinking for A game.
Thank you.
And when it comes to B game as well, the human brain uh, is really wired to do a couple main things, right? Is to preserve energy and it's to protect you. So it does look kind of externally, um, you know, for potential threats. And that's just how we're wired. And if we think about cavemen, they had to be looking behind their backs to see if there was something getting ready to come after them, right? So But the idea here is with B game, we're actually in that up to 95% of the time, because the brain it re it really relies on patterns, right? It relies on
Mm-hmm.
autopilot thinking. If you think about maybe a common drive that you have, maybe to a grocery store, to to your workplace, most people usually take the same route every day,
Mm-hmm.
right? And sometimes you'll be thinking about something completely different, right? And like, oh, yeah, I guess I'm at work or I'm at the grocery store now, time to go in. That's all B game. That's all pattern based thinking. So if we think about A game as or thinking perspectives as thinking streets, A game is maybe a path or a street that you don't often take. And what happens when you do that? When you get on a street for the first time, you're much more aware, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
looking around, you're very conscious of what's happening, right? So again, it's more of a conscious and active process when you're in A game versus B game is completely relying on, kind of patterns and stuff like that. And again, we're in that space up to 95% of the time. And that's not at fault. We're not at fault for that. That's how we're wired.
That's how
That's
you're
how
programmed.
we survive. Yeah, as humans. Like if we were consciously thinking about everything, I'm not sure if we could survive.
Yeah.
So the idea is to start remapping some of these streets that are aligned and oriented towards value creation. And before you know it, that actually becomes your process and your natural habitual way of thinking. And it's a powerful transformation, if people do commit to the work. And it takes some time, rerouting thinking patterns. I'm sure you know this yourself, right? Like that can take a minute, but with desire and a strong enough reason to do it, those are the people I work with.
100%. I definitely agree that it's a very powerful transformation aspect of it. And yeah, you're totally right. Also, on how 95% or 90% of our life is based on or could be tracked according to patterns and things that we have learned from the society or from our own lived experiences. Um, how did you come across this concept? How did you, what experience of your life led you towards this concept and like really embracing this concept as well to an extent where you are coaching it now?
Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of a cool story. When I was working on my master's, I was still at the credit union at that time. And one of the assignments was to discover a podcast, do research on a leadership-based podcast, and then write a paper on it, connecting the theories we were learning about, all of that good stuff. The one I found was something called The Look and Sound of Leadership, and it's narrated by, I'm pretty sure this guy has like a theater background. He's pretty animated, and I appreciate it, but like no shade, but yeah, it's kind of corny at times. Like, 'cause he would play, his client, and then he would be the coach, right? And he would just kind of narrate the conversations. But the more I was listening to that, the more I was, and this kind of goes back to what my mom, reminds me of too, is like, I've always been curious about people and just really want to help them and nurture them and help them, make sense of what's going on around them. The more I was listening to that podcast, the more I was understanding that in my one-on-ones with my team members at that time, I was actually coaching. Like
Mm,
I was uh, asking solution kind of oriented questions, and I was helping them, see what might be in the way, get more clear in what they want to accomplish. That was just something I was naturally doing. Um, so I actually reached out to that podcast host and asked if I could interview him, and he said yes. It's like, okay, sweet. So we actually talked for about an hour, and he guided me to the ICF website, International Coaching Federation. And on that website, there's actually a find a coach feature. So I looked for all the coaches in the Denver metro area. And I think I found like five or six, something like that. And one of them forwarded my email to who became my coach, right? And it
oh,
turns out that my coach was actually the founder of the ICF Colorado chapter, and she was one of the
Wow.
first people to go through the professional coaching training, and she's an MCC, a master certified coach now. So for me to be exposed to her in that way, I don't know, I can't just help but believe there's something out, the bigger force out there aligning
Mm-hmm.
things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a long way of getting to, she's the one that introduced me into Valuegenic self-leadership work that I do with people today. So one of the first things I did was took my assessment and then we debriefed together. And I was hooked at that point. Like, oh wow, like I now am understanding why I can't away from this obstacle, or why I can't overcome this certain thing. And at the time, I had some personal stuff going on, in my relationship. And then, yeah, even work, like I was still kind of understanding what was next for me. So her exposing me to that and actually guiding me through the program that I guide people through now is what inspired me to become a coach. Right.
Wow.
So I don't just train people in it and guide people through it. Like I live it out. It's what I'm about, it's creating value and not just acquiring it, right? But actually using, like, going within, noticing that we all have unique intrinsic value, and then using that to actually create more value in the world, right? Because if we're so focused on collecting value or acquiring it, then we're going to eventually run out, right?
Yeah.
So we've got to go out and create. So yeah, that's kind of the story of how I got exposed to this work. And I'm actually going to a conference this month, a little later this month, the Robert S. Hartman Institute conference. And Robert Hartman is the man who discovered formal axiology and this hierarchy of value that we talked about a little earlier. So there's a lot of axiologists, they're called, that are practitioners and really putting this work out there in the world. And I truly believe it could actually save the world. I hope it can.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that in so much detail. And I very much agree with you. I feel like things always happen for a reason, whether those be good things in life that lead us towards comfort, or whether that be bad things in life that leads us towards growth. Um, and when I feel like when one sets up an intention in terms of empowering themselves or in terms of self-growth, the universe automatically opens up doors. It
Mm,
leads us into directions or pathways, like as you just said, like it was just meant to happen. Um, and we have to keep our hopes high for that, and we have to keep our doors open for that, or keep our mindset in that curious mode where we are looking either to self grow or to grow and support the community.
mm,
Because empowering the community, I feel like always is so, so, so powerful. It can, because it causes a ripple effect. It's not just that you are doing something for yourself. If you're doing something for the community, it's gonna not just empower the person that you're helping, but it will probably empower their family too. It will
yeah,
probably empower their social circle too, their relationships, their friendships around them,
mm,
because it it seeps into it. It really seeps into it.
yeah, yeah. That's wonderful. I'm just grinning as I hear you say that, and a lot of people. Uh, And you may notice the same thing, but yeah, like tend to minimize themselves or not realize the amount of ripple effect that they actually have, and influence they actually have. And when you're self-leading from that empowered space that you're talking about there, that's all energy too. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, to your point, like it's radiating out, and you're influencing. It's not controlling what's going on around you, but it's increasing your potential to influence what happens around you. And to your point, right, the kind of the trickle down effect or the snowball effect or whatever you want to call it, if you're self-leading in a way that inspires someone else, what if they go home and talk to their spouse a little different, or talk to their kid a little different, right? Or, be curious instead of controlling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And right? Like that might start disrupting generational, trauma patterns
Trauma.
and like all of that, right? Like it's just so much power we're capable of, and especially when it's used in a way to create value, right? To give to the community, like you said, to be in a place of service and not, uh, not from a place of, again, like trying to control or coerce or, um, kind of oppress people. It's much
Yeah,
different.
100%. Again, like first, I feel like the most important thing is filling our own cup, but when that's filled up, then
Mm,
giving it back to the community. I think it's really, really, really important. One thing that me and you spoke about when we connected up on LinkedIn was your passion about men's mental health. You sent me a survey that I filled out. You mentioned about the research that you are doing. Can you reflect a little bit about that?
yeah, yeah, definitely. So, I find um, that there aren't a lot of, how do I want to say this? People that look like me, even in the coaching world, and I think we even talked about this a little bit too, and counseling and therapy as well. Um, a lot of men have just had these messages that were, around what it is around masculinity and around, who you need to be and what a man is and all of that. And, a lot of us grew up with pretty strong messaging around what that is. And I'm just not convinced at this point that, um, that's in a way that's actually being in service to, our growth as men and our mental health journey as men and just our overall well-being and in our spirit even. So the survey you mentioned. I'm just asking men about what their experience is today and what is it like to be, a man in today's world, because there's a lot that's changed based on even when I was raised, right? We now have, you know, phones and influencers and all of this stuff, like this constant, just information that we're being bombarded with. So I have a lot of curiosity around how men are experiencing today's world. And that's the idea of the survey, is collecting some of that information. So eventually resources can be provided to help, men along, their mental health journey. So one of the stats, for example, one of the questions I ask is, what messages did you receive about what it means to be a man, right, while growing up? And, some of the things: real men don't show emotion, be strong, dominant, and control. Your worth comes from success. Winning is everything. You have to figure things out on your own. And, the numbers around, some of those are pretty staggering. And, so the next question is, what's your relationship with those messages now? And over 50% are actually actively rewriting those messages, right?
Wow.
And the next step down is, at 13%, I'm questioning them. You know what I mean? So again,
Mm-hmm.
it's more than a hunch of, the men I've been working with, in my self-leadership program, or just even if it's, um, one twice removed, maybe is the way to say that, right? Like if I'm talking to someone's spouse, like maybe a wife, and she's expressing some of the challenges she's facing, with her husband. It really speaks to this bigger idea that there's a shift that's happening, but a lot of men aren't quite sure how to even start their mental health journey, where to begin, because, right, you got to figure everything out on your own. You don't ask for help. Right? So it's, again, these messages are actually, um, kind of keeping us held back from healing and just being fully healthy, emotionally healthy, physiologically healthy, spiritually healthy men in today's world. So that's a little more about, the initiative there. And, I also work with some college students, up at CU, and um, even the younger men who are kind of confused and their brains are still developing, right? Of like the
Mm-hmm.
messaging that they're hearing, from some YouTuber or, some influencer of, that are reinforcing some of those, got to be dominant, you got to be the alpha, like all of that stuff. And it's like, I'm just not sure that's helpful for us to be in healthy relationships. I'm not sure that's healthy for the world. I'm not sure that's healthy for our communities, etc. So it's my intention to make it cool, to take care of yourself in a way that actually, uh, again, like has you embrace your mental health journey and your emotional health and all of that.
I really, really, really appreciate you and respect you for doing that work and this research because it's so much needed, Jordan, in today's time and age in this world because it's not just a US thing, it's a global thing. It's
Yeah.
any culture, anywhere in the world you go. A lot of things are different, but this thing is pretty much the same, where the expectations for men is constant. It's constant and it's very much at the same wavelength. It's not like, oh, in this country it's different, in that country it's different. It's culturally those expectations have been put on men for generations, and even for women in a lot of areas, those expectations are there.
Yeah.
But uh, I feel like, as you said, about men, it's talked a lot less about. Um, One of my close friends is running up a therapy group here in Colorado around men's domestic violence that men are going through. And she told me that how that is the only group that's offered within miles and miles, I think 30 or 50 plus miles of
Yeah.
radius in the whole state. And
Hmm.
that is shocking. That is shocking, shocking, because people who are going through those experiences, even if they want to take the risk of getting that support is not available. That support is not accessible.
Hmm.
So even if you take the courage that, okay, I'm going to do that, I'm going to try and rewrite the patterns, I'm going to try and work towards my self growth, I'm going to try and see if there are any resources available. And when they look up for it, it's not. And I can't even imagine how demoralizing that might be.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate the work that you're doing in that field, and would love to hear and keep tabs on what you come with, what the research results are, because I'm sure those results would speak volumes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that point up. It's a vulnerable step, to even sit down and Google, like how do I start my mental health journey, or I've gone through this experience, like domestic violence, for example, and how can I create some support or seek some support around that? And to your point, if there's minimal resources or if there isn't something that you feel connected to, yeah, that can be pretty, like you use the word demoralizing, yeah, like discouraging. And I definitely get, this stance that, um, there's, kind of as history has unfolded, there's been a lot of resources that have been catered toward men, right? Like I've heard the argument, like you all have enough, like get it figured out, right? It's like, well, like if we're making the space for men to come and heal and grow and develop, that's actually going to be mutually beneficial you know, it's going to be beneficial for all of us. So, I mean, that's kind of the view I have on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, to take over or anything like that. It's more so they're self-leading, right? Or kind of coming from that empowered, healthy space so they can be better dads, so they can be better husbands, so they can be better
Exactly.
like leaders, so they can do that in a way that actually again contributes to society in a helpful and a valuable way. Like it actually creates value in the world.
It ripples down. The same thing that we spoke about before, that it has a ripple effect on everyone that you interact with. A
Mhm.
young boy, a 16, 17, 18, 15-year-old boy, if if he's growing up with anger, if he's growing up in a troubled household where he's getting these messages where that being abusive to women or being loud or disrespectful towards women is a good thing, or is something that he saw probably his dad doing to his mom, and he does not process it, he does not go through the journey of working through that struggle of generational trauma, then he's going to do the exact same thing to his family, because then that's going to be more of an acceptable thing. Or for example, how men are told to just keep moving forward and, like, don't process your emotions, just keep going forward, forward, and forward. Eventually what happens is that you get in a situation in life where you are probably unhappy at work, you are
Mhm.
unhappy with what how much money you're making, what you're doing. It starts causing up a lot of stresses. You
Yeah,
can't take it out at your boss, so you come back home and you take it out at your family, because again, it's all unprocessed.
yeah,
So there needs to be more spaces where people can talk about this, people can be vulnerable, and people can grow into being the best version of themselves. um, these resources and these things need to be talked about more, and I agree with you. Like, the world in the last 2000, 3000, 5000, historically the world has always been more dominant by men in a lot of different fields, lots of different areas. That's how
right.
it's been. Men privilege does exist, but at the same time, men's struggles also do exist, because we are all humans at the end of the day. We all go through different highs, lows, grief. It's not like we are immune to any of those things. And if those things don't get channeled out in a healthy way, or don't get processed out in a healthy way, then it trickles down to other people around us. And which is why I feel like, again, it's needed to be talked about more. There needs to be more resources and support in these areas, not just so that it benefits men, but so that it benefits society.
Yeah, beautifully said. Yeah. One of my favorite authors and spiritual teachers is Michael Singer. So he wrote like The Untethered Soul. I think he has another bestseller out there, but he talks he uses a Sanskrit word, samskaras, quite a bit. And I think that's kind of the version of what you're talking about is suppressed emotions. That's actually like stuff getting stuck kind of in our, our life force system, if you will. Or
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, you wonder why people are getting sick or, having breakdowns or burning out and, or having these outbursts, right? Because they're not letting things pass through them and they're not processing them, like you said, in a healthy way. You know, and I can't help but kind of smirk when people say, like, I don't do emotions or like I don't have them. Like, well, if you're a human, you have emotions, right? Like that, these aren't things you can just turn on and off. We're emotional beings. So getting to understand and embrace that, I feel like is an important first step too of making more sense of what emotions you are feeling and what you're experiencing and so again to your point, we can just process it in a more
Mm-hmm.
way and we're not carrying around, right, like these blocks inside of our spirit and our soul, and again, like passing it down to the next generation, right? This is how we start healing not only ourselves, but yeah, kind of having that ripple effect like you talk about.
Yeah, yeah. Self-healing is super important. What's something that you do for to keep yourself grounded in stressful situations? What are there any rituals? Are there any practices that you do?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm a huge believer in I have meditation practice. Uh I've been initiated um in Kriya yoga, so Kriya, and autobiography of a yogi is where someone could learn about that if they're interested, that book. Um, but ideally, right, like sitting down or sitting in silence, right, and paying attention to breath, because without breath, there's nothing. There's no life without breath, right? And that's one of the most accessible ways for us to be grounded. I mean, we could literally just pause and count 5, 10 breaths, and that will do wonders for our nervous system. I know you know this, but right, like our physiological state. Um, so that is a critical thing for me is just making sure I'm taking time to slow down my thoughts, right, and just be with myself, right. So meditation is top of the list for me, and then the North Star of the self-leadership program that I guide people through is something called the central question of life, love, and leadership. And that question is, What choice can I make and action can I take in this moment to create the greatest net value? Right. And again, if you were to actually ask yourself that question, and it's not meant to be rhetorical, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're actually aligning back to the head, hands, and heart thing. You're aligning your head, hands, and heart. What choice, the head, and action? Or what choice can I make in action? That's the hands. Can I take in this moment to create the greatest net value? And that's what we mean by the heart, right? Like quality of life, goodness. Um, so that is another tool that's portable, right? In any moment, if I'm having a disagreement with my wife, or if I'm even in a meeting or something like that, and something like kind of touches on me in a way that I don't appreciate, or I feel my blood boiling a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Emotions rising up. That question is something I constantly go back to, right? And that actually is self-leadership, right? Like that's you actually stepping out of B game, reactivity, pattern-based reactions, and that's helping you actually step into more of a conscious, value generative, value creating mindset so you can influence, the moment and bring your best self forward. So those are a couple of things there.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And what advice would you give to someone who feels like they are late in figuring their life out?
Hmm. Um, that's that's interesting. I've been so I'm working on a resource, a bigger article called the self-leadership renewal loop. And the idea is that uh, we reach, and I'm in it, I think currently, right? Like we get into our upper 30s, and start to go back into that space that we talked about earlier of letting go and like identity shedding and stepping into becoming. So if you think about even what a caterpillar does in a cocoon, right? Like it goes into a cocoon and
Mm-hmm.
and think it's dying. Like it's literally a very uncomfortable feeling, and it turns into pure goop. Like it turns into nothing. And then it actually recreates, and it uh, yeah, generates itself, right? And turns into something that can fly. Like how beautiful is
Mm-hmm.
that? So I think it's normalizing it is the first thing is I would say to that is I don't think it's ever too late. And if you don't start now, then it's going to be even more challenging to start your journey, and it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to be weird because your B game, your patterns are going to tell you are going to be like, what are you doing? Like, this is how we do it, and this is how the world works, and this is how you are. Um, so, I'd say like having some grace, and even back to the compassion things, some self-compassion, because your journey and recreating and kind of actively creating who you are and how you show up in the world, that's a process, and it's not meant to be rushed. And I think that's a challenge today as well in today's hyper-speed world where you can you know, order something on Amazon and it'll show up that same day. Like people tend to look at their personal growth journey and their mental health journey in the same way, like fix me. It's like you're not meant to be fixed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
This is an active process, and the more you resist, that it is a process, the more challenging it's going to be. So it's more so just embrace it, and be kind to yourself and loving to yourself. Because if you're not, who else is going to be, and someone else can't love you into healing. Like you've got to actually step into that yourself. So those are a few words I'd have for the time being, and just knowing that, there's always a choice. There's always a choice.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sh sh saying that because I don't think that's a few words. I think that's really, really, really powerful and empowering to hear. Embracing our true selves, embracing and being confident in our skin, being
Mhm.
curious, being acceptance of what we are thinking, processing those things. I feel like that can really go a long way for a lot of folks. And also for us, I feel like we can keep going on and keep talking about these things because these are some real struggles that people are going through. And folks like yourself who are in coaching, or like myself who are counselors and therapists, we see people go through these struggles. So it's a very interesting topic that we can just keep going on and on around. But lastly, to wrap up our conversations, how can people support the work that you're doing? How can people find you? I'll definitely leave up the links in the description. But if you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I'd invite people to check out my website, www.jordanwhitecoaching.com. And then, yeah, if there are men who are in within that 18 to 44 age range, that's the research, I'm doing. So young men up to the top of the millennial age group, you can head over to www.valuespherecommunity.com where you can actually partake in that survey because I'd really appreciate hearing from you all with the intention of giving resources back, So I think, being part of that community, I greatly appreciate it. And even if there's a man in your life who, could maybe use something like that. Um, and lastly, I mean, how we met was actually on LinkedIn, and that's where I spend most of my social media time, if we even want to call it that. It's I have an Instagram. I'm just not on it that often. More so on LinkedIn, and then I also have a Substack. So people, search for Jordan White there. They should be able to find that, and that's where I'm actually publishing weekly articles, just offering some of these ideas that we've talked about today. And, my intention again is just to help people think better so they can do better and so they can be better. And that's what the Substack is all about as well. So those are a few places you can get in touch. And yeah, I appreciate you creating space for people to get in touch. I'd really love to support whoever's ready.
Of course, definitely. And as I said, all the links would be in the description for folks to find out as well. But thank you so much, Jordan, for the work that you're doing in the community. I think it's extremely needed, it's extremely powerful. And I really appreciate the genuineness and the honesty that you're bringing up to that work. But thank you again for being on this podcast and for talking with us today.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks, Z. I think we kind of laughed about it when we first met, but it takes one to know one, my friend. So thank you for the work you're doing. And I'm honored. I feel honored to be a guest here. And I can't wait to continue supporting the work that you're doing in the
Thank
community
you.
as well. Hopefully, yeah, even collaborate, in the Denver community and see what we can do to help heal from the inside out.
I'll 110% be down for that. And I feel like we can also do a part two for this podcast as well, because there is so much more that we can talk about in terms of the research and how things are progressing in the world, not just in leadership, but also in the mental health space as well. But again, thank you so much for taking out the time, Jordan. I wish you all the best in everything that you're doing, and let's stay connected and let's continuing empowering the world to the best of our abilities.
Thanks, Z. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye bye.